Jagex just recently put up a blog for Project Rebalance with a bunch of changes to combat and items, some really, really major. So let's just get right into it. We have some big changes to magic gear here. The main change is Occult has lost 10% magic damage and has been reduced to 4% damage, and they have spread this damage out to different robe pieces. That 6% just goes straight into each ancestral piece, 2% per piece, 2% to hat, robe top, and robe bottom. And then Virtus robes, Infinity robes, Dagon High, those all get a smaller amount of damage, so those don't matter too much. They have also given Augury 4% magic damage, which I think is a really good change. Effectively, what this means is if you were already taking the full magic gear somewhere, you're just getting some extra damage from Augury. So Shadow users rejoice, you already needed all that gear anyways. If you don't have a Shadow at a location, or if it's just a place that doesn't benefit from Shadow, let's say something like Tob where you're bringing a Sang and you have less switches, now you're going to need more switches to do the same thing. I think this probably needed to happen, but the issue is that magic is probably the weakest style almost always. So doing this kind of change without some buff to magic is kind of rough in a lot of places. And they did give Augury some magic damage, so you'll be encouraged to use it everywhere and you are getting benefit from it. But in those places like Tob or people with mid-level gear, this is going to be quite a bit worse for magic in general. I love the change to Augury. It really encourages you to use that prayer where a lot of times you just didn't even bother. This is also a small buff to CG, where you'll get some max hits from Augury in there where you normally wouldn't. So CG will be a little bit easier as well. Moving on to Soulreaper Axe, this thing has been buffed quite a bit. So less so in the damage and accuracy and more so in just usability. So stacks will no longer be lost instantly upon switching weapons. Okay, cool. We can spec with the Soulreaper Axe now. Good. It was basically unusable because of this. All right, so that's a huge buff. Stacks will start decrementing after 20 ticks, which is 12 seconds without attacking, up from 10 ticks, which is 6 seconds. So you have a lot more time before you start losing stacks. That's really, really good as well. And then when stacks naturally degrade, they'll heal you for the damage you took while building those stacks up. So if you swap weapons after you've used the Soulreaper Axe and you start using something else and attacking, you'll slowly get that health back over time. Now this is really interesting because it would have a lot of setups for tick eats potentially with very proper timing. I could picture you doing one Soulreaper Axe swing on the P1 obelisk to automatically tick eat the orbs, for example. So this has a lot of potential in different places. I could see a lot of interesting tick eat setups. Not only that, the Soulreaper Axe is just much more usable and much less punishing to use. So it should be very usable in almost every location now. So this is massive for the axe. Inside of Colosseum, they also have recently with the last update made it so Soulreaper Axe doesn't trigger things like Blasphemy or Doom. So it should also just be completely usable inside of Colosseum as your second bis, which is really cool to see. Elder Maul, this is a spicy change. So instead of just being a useless mega rare junk item, they are making Elder Maul have a special attack that takes 50% of spec energy, which reduces your target's defense by 35%, which if you know Dragon Warhammer is 30%, this just means Elder Maul is a direct upgrade to Dragon Warhammer. It is the better Dragon Warhammer. Very, very interesting. It also means you don't need something like an Avernic with your Warhammer, and it's also just more accurate. So it's more accurate, it drains more defense, and you don't need an offhand to make it work. They did remember to allow you to smash crabs and build the chest with the Elder Maul, but they forgot to give Tecton that first spec guaranteed hit. So I'm sure that's a bug and they'll be changing it, but currently Tecton is not a guaranteed hit with Elder Maul in the beta. Now, if this change was done before Colosseum came out, I would say this is an excellent change and something that really shakes up the defense meta, something that really needed to happen. The problem is that Colosseum has just added as its rarest drop an item which drains defense as well. And it turns out that that thing, that glaive, the Tenalstics of Ralos, is complete utter garbage, and you will use it at no locations except for large team chambers and Maiden. And that's it. That's its entire use case. So in reality, what they should have done is made the glaive this. It should be the better Dragon Warhammer. There's no reason the Inferno's rarest drop equivalent is completely useless at all locations, and the Elder Maul is the new bis Dragon Warhammer. It doesn't make any sense. If you want to do this Elder Maul change, great. I think they also need to buff the glaive dramatically. I think it needs to drain 20% per splat instead of 10%. So that way the glaive should be better in some cases or worse in some cases depending on mage level. So you actually have a choice here. The Elder Maul should be competing with the glaive, and the Warhammer and the BGS can be worse options. I'm okay with that. No clue why they're so dedicated to keeping items so bad and niche at Colosseum when it's such difficult content and really should have rewarding items. Okay, Ink Armor and Ink Mace. Ooh, interesting. I was hoping this would be good. Okay. While using the Ink Mace, damage and accuracy bonuses from the Ink Armor, including the set effect bonus, is tripled. In a full set with the Mace, the bonuses increase from 2.5% to 7.5% total damage and accuracy. And this was not the change anybody wanted. Nobody at all. People were looking for things like much higher hammer chance, much higher crush bonus, tankier ink armor, because it's the equivalent of adamant armor right now. No, this is not it. So effectively what this change means is that the mace is now best in slot at Nightmare, and that is it. You're probably not going to bring this to Tecton still because Elder Maul is just really strong at Tecton and you don't need it. Yeah, I don't really get this change. You're trying to make Ink Mace with full ink armor a gap filler up to Scythe, but Ink Armor and Mace are probably equally as rare. To get the whole thing as Scythe may be rarer. So I don't really get this trying to make it a gap filler. I don't get this trying to make Ink Mace good at the same time. Inquisitor Armor has a cool niche where it makes your crush attacks really good, and it makes Warhammers land more often. And you're making Elder Maul really good, so it still is doing the same thing. You're still going to use it for the same purpose. Just make it better at what it does good, which is more accurate hammers and maybe tankier, because you're choosing to use paper armor over Torva, and it just feels really bad to use in places where you use it. CM, where everything is hitting you like a truck. About to dial. So, yeah, not really sure where they're going with this. This seems like kind of a failed change to me.
Know your fucking place, trash.
All right, we're to that clickbait part of the video, that part that's in the thumbnail. So I'm sure Gnomonkey's just hyping this up, and the Voidwaker's probably still good in a lot of places, and he's just exaggerating. All right, let's read what the change is. Adjust the Voidwaker special attack so that it no longer ignores accuracy, but instead rolls with plus 200% increased accuracy and rolls against your target's slash or magic defense, depending on which is lower. So yeah, no, it is completely useless at all locations. Like, you will not use it at any place that you used it before. Where is the Voidwaker good? Oh, it's good at things that are extremely tanky. Things like Kefri, things like Nex. What do those bosses have a lot of? Oh yeah, defense. Magic and slash defense. Both of those have insane magic and slash defense. And those are your main uses. Okay, I still use it at CM. Can I use it there? Oh no, things have very high mage level there, and they have very high slash defense there. That's the whole reason I'm using it, is to bypass that. Effectively, what this change does is replaces Voidwaker with Claws. It is worse in every way than Claws, and you will never ever use it again. Needless to say, that is a slightly dumb change, I would say. I think they should have not touched this item and left it right where it was. It had a beautiful little spot where it fit in. Claws have use at a load of locations. Voidwaker has use at a lot of locations. And ZCB has use at more locations than both of those combined. So, not really sure why this was necessary, but they did it anyways. Really hoping they go back on this. I've seen Mod Goblin saying quite a bit that they weren't really sure on this change and they were hoping to get some feedback. Well, here's the feedback. This is a dumb change. It doesn't fix anything. It completely axes this interesting, useful spec weapon and makes it so you will never, ever use it again at any location. Voidwaker has a right to be good. It's an item that is dropped in pieces from all the wildy bosses at a very rare rate. It's their rarest item. You need 3 pieces from the different wildy bosses. They spend all this time trying to revamp the wildy and make it interesting and make the bosses unique and make the drops good. Well, if they don't drop this anymore, no one is killing them, and even the bots will leave immediately, because this is the whole reason they're killing them, is for those Voidwaker pieces. So yeah, I definitely don't get this change. This is probably the most questionable change on the entire blog. I genuinely, it feels like no thought went into this. I don't know. I don't really get it. I don't get the point of this. I really don't. Ancient Godsword. Okay, this change doesn't really affect me. Healing from successful blood sack now heals for 15% of the target's maximum HP up to a 25 HP cap. So that's, instead of just getting a flat 25 health, it's healing you up to what their max health is. This is a PvP change. It's not going to affect PVM whatsoever. You can still use it everywhere that you did, even though you really barely used it in PVM. It's still going to be used in solo hard mode TOB and some other locations, so not really changed in PVM whatsoever. This is a PvP change specifically. It's fine. I don't see an issue with it. Overall, I think the majority of these item changes are either not succeeding at what they are trying to do, or are just bizarre and out of left field. So I'm hoping they look at these and refine it a little bit. I do think that mage robes should be needed at a lot of places to get that mage damage, but I feel like mage is just too weak to be doing this change right now. Maybe if they do this change and also buff mage a little bit, then it'll be a little bit more called for, but a lot of the things like the ink change and the Voidwaker change are just like, what are they thinking? What is this supposed to be doing? Love the Soulreaper Axe change. Elder Maul change could be cool, but don't forget the glaive exists. A lot of people have said, oh, this paves the way for future updates and that kind of thing. I think giving Jagex that out of, oh, I'm sure it will be good in the future, just doesn't make any sense. If the changes don't make sense right now, make it when that future content comes out. There is no reason to make a change that doesn't make sense before an update comes out. If it doesn't make sense to put in right now, don't put it in right now. Just wait until that update comes out and then put out the change. With this update, outside of the item changes, there were also a lot of changes to loot and some other weird changes to PVM, so let's get into that. The Dragon Warhammer's drop rate was buffed dramatically from 1 out of 5,000 to 1 out of 3,000. This is a notoriously rare drop. I don't mind it being more common. I have no issue with it. This sounds like a good change. Nightmare as well has had a bunch of items dropped. Roughly 33%, it says in the blog 50% more common. It's roughly 33% more common for all the drops across the board. Nightmare is known as one of the worst bosses to complete on an Iron Man, and also it just has absurdly rare drops. They're buffing some of the drops. Makes sense to also have them more common. I like this change. This is also good. It probably should have been this way from the start. Okay, minimum hit adjustments. So I was really excited for this because they're removing 0 hit splats on. So the way the game works, if you don't know, is your character rolls to see if they get accuracy when they swing their weapon. If they pass accuracy, they are then rolling from 0 to the max hit that they can land with your weapon, right? This change would make it so instead of rolling from 0 to max hit, you roll from 1 to max hit. And that's what I thought they were going to do, and that's what I wanted them to do. Just remove those 0 hit splats. This would be a big buff for very fast weapons and Scythe. Not a huge buff, roughly 5% DPS on things that have 0 defense. So as things get more defense, this change is even less noticeable. But say on a fully drained Maiden, new Scythe would be quite a bit more powerful, which is probably good because Scythe needs a little bit more juice, probably. So what they actually did was on hit, damage rolls between 1 and current max hit -1. So effectively what they did is they chopped that max hit off your true max hit and they put it instead of the 0 as 1 as your minimum hit. So they give an example. If your max hit is 58, your damage rolls between 1 and 57. I don't like this change. This complicates things so much for no reason. And I took a bunch of notes and tested a bunch of things. So here's a good example of a problem that arises. Fang rolls accuracy twice. So its minimum hit in max gear is 8. So with this change, it now is a minimum hit of 10 because in the engine, the game is looking for it to pass accuracy twice and it's giving it that minimum hit. Well, now it's a minimum hit of 10. So we have engine work causing a problem. It has an extra max hit effectively. Fang has been buffed slightly. Not even slightly, quite a bit. Okay, this is probably a mistake they'll fix. Venator Bow loses 2 max hits because on the ricochets of Venator Bow, it's taking that lower max hit for the ricochet damage and multiplying that by 0.66. So overall, Venator loses 2 max hits. Also a problem. They can probably fix that too. I thought the Scythe was going to be worse because you're going from 50 max hit to 49 max hit, and I figured this would make Bellator a lot worse because it would take you down to 47 instead of 48. And if you don't know how Scythe works, every 4 max hits, it's getting 3 max hits effectively. So when you get 40 max hit, it's giving an extra max hit to each of the splats because it has 3 hit splats. So every 4th max hit, it gets 3 max hits. That's how it works. So I thought, oh, you're losing that multiple of 4. This is actually going to be a huge nerf to Bellator. Well, in actuality, it's taking the true max hit and then making the splats off that. So it's looking at if you have 50 max hit and it's taking your max hit down to 49 on that 3rd splat, it is properly giving the other 2 splats their correct hit splat. It's not lowering them. So for Venator Bow, it isn't doing that. It's losing max hits, but Scythe works properly. They thought of Scythe. This introduces a tremendous amount of problems. There's so many weird cases where an item rolls damage in a unique way, or has additional hit splats, or has ricochets, or maybe chins have hit splats on different targets, or things like that. There's so many different weapons. This overcomplicates weapons to such an extent that there is no way they can catch every single bug. And also, it just doesn't make sense on a surface level as a player. You're looking at this and you're like, oh, I can't actually hit my max hit. How does this work? How does this work with different weird weapons? It's not intuitive on any level. I say, screw this. Just make the zeros not hit 0 anymore, or don't do it. Don't do this weird thing where it's taking true max hit and it's subtracting 1. You don't need to... We don't need to be juggling to figure out what my max hit is. It should just be what it is. If they're not okay with a slight buff to blowpipe and scythe, then just don't do this change. I don't think it's worth it. This overcomplicates every single weapon in the game for no benefit. Either make it so zeros don't exist anymore and you keep your normal max hit, or just don't do this change if it's too much. I think it's not too much, totally fine, remove zeros, not a problem. Okay, early game combat prayers. This is a really small change and it doesn't really affect anybody, but I think it's a good change anyways. Effectively, the super low level prayers were draining too much prayer to even be used at all, and also they were barely doing anything. So they've dramatically reduced the drain rate on the super early prayers, and then they've given them some bonus damage. Totally fine, good change, probably needed to be this way anyways. Autocast delay. So they have just completely axed autocast delay. This is a really, really good change. This is really nice. It always felt weird that auto casting is a tick slower than just manual casting. Now it is the same always. Auto cast is always going to have no delay. Really, really nice. I think this is really silly with the myopia change for Colosseum, in that manual casting is unaffected, but auto casting is. They should make it so myopia always affects spells and manual casting isn't getting that benefit. There's no reason that clicking manually with a spell has a different interaction with the game than auto casting. That shouldn't change how spells work at all. This is like a weird PvP. Clicking on a spell and then clicking a target is harder. This is some weird PvP, I don't know. Okay, Theater of Blood Verzik Phase 2. So they finally did that red crab change. Awesome. So if you're down to 1 player left at P2, and you're at the red crab part of the phase, it will only spawn 1 red crab, meaning you can actually out DPS it and kill Verzik. Now, this is a great change for solos. It means you don't have to sit there for 15 minutes and tick eat, but it has a problem. They forgot to lower the lightning damage. So the lightning damage actually is still 50, meaning that if your teammates die and you're the last person left, and now you have a fighting chance to actually beat her because you can actually out DPS, well, you're still going to die in a second anyways because the lightning's going to kill you instantly. So they definitely need to change that. In hard mode Tob, it is scaled down properly. So solo hard mode Tob is known for only having 1 red crab and lower lightning damage. They forgot the lower lightning damage part. So that definitely needs to be changed. Besides that great change, this makes solos a lot more viable and actually decent money if you're very good at them. And it also allows you to clutch out a kill if your entire team wipes and you're trying to help them learn and you're trying to carry. Great change. Okay, monkey room changes. Interesting. Wasn't expecting that this update. They have increased the hit points for all style-based enemies inside the monkey room, and these enemies will now always take max damage when attacked with the opposing combat style. That's a very big change and a very good change. This is very good to see. I didn't even go and test it, but this is going to speed up monkey room dramatically, making it not by far the longest puzzle room compared to the other ones. And it's also just going to make it much more tolerable and viable to complete. I like that their health scales with raid level, meaning you'll need to do more switches the higher your raid level is. I think this is a much more intuitive way of doing the monkey room, and it makes a lot of sense to make it this way. Great change. Love to see it. They also did a change to Baba. Baba now only hits for 25% of damage to protect from melee, down from 33%. This reduces the damage by around 24%. Yeah, this is a non-change. This doesn't prevent red Xing. The next line is kind of frustrating too. This should prevent players losing so much DPS to red X, although those looking to save supplies will find it isn't removed entirely. At a very high raid level, you don't have supplies, so you're not going to stop red Xing. This doesn't change anything. Unfortunate. I'd really like to see them completely change this fight or axe or damage down at least quite a bit so we could stop doing that, but for now, it's basically a non-change. Kind of nice if you're at a sub 400 raid level for Baba. Last thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention with the mage damage, a lot of people are worried about one-shotting the Fremnik in Colosseum, and will I need a bunch of switches, and do I need to complete Colosseum now before this gets nerfed? If you have Shadow, Occult, Torm, and Heart, those 4 items, if you use Augury, you will still one-shot the Fremi with the same amount of slots used. The difference is you just need Augury. So not a big deal for Colosseum at all. It still is going to be just fine. You just need those 4 items and Augury. Unfortunately, though, with the minimum hit changes, you are not going to be one-shotting the Ranger with Scythe, so good luck with that. Overall, there's a handful of pretty good and interesting ideas here, and then there's a lot of I don't know what they're thinking changes. I'm really glad this is in a beta and not just thrown into the game hastily. I hope they take feedback and keep tweaking these rebalances to suit the content we have now, and not just future content that we may or may not get or have even heard of. Considering this is a completely unpolled change, they really need to be listening to the community on this and really getting it right. And that's it for the video. Leave a like if you liked it and or subscribe. Thanks, guys.